People that really know cells, this is a massive breakthrough.
Houston, we have a problem.
Tesla's amazing breakthrough 4680 batteries that were announced by Tesla 2 years ago turned out to be a lie as they went into production. But a Tesla influencer and an investor, Warren Redlick, disagrees with me, as he often does.
And I don't think you're correct.
Whenever that happens, we turn our cameras on and publish it on one of our channels. It's my turn this time, so let's get going. But before that, a quick reminder that this video is brought to you by Flow. Always reliable, extremely durable. The Flow Home is a level 2 EV charging station designed to make your life easier and is compatible with any EV in North America. Learn more about the Flow Home at flow.com. And by NeoCharge, you can now charge 2 cars at the same time without spending a ton of money on rewiring your home. All you need is the smart splitter from NeoCharge. Get one today and use the discount code in the description of this video. All right, now we've talked last time on this channel about, whether or not Tesla's FSD, a scam. Obviously we disagree. That's why you're here. We're not here to, hug and agree on everything. That would be boring. Another thing that Tesla has promised, which again, I'm not sure if I would go as far as calling it a scam, but it's close if you ask me. It's kind of the same as the one with FSD, is the 4680 batteries. So let me kind of, start off by saying that, no matter what happens with these, it is once again Tesla that's trying to make the step forward in yet another technology that technically is not their thing. They make cars, This should have been CATL. That should have been Samsung or Panasonic, right? And yet they sat on their asses, done absolutely no progress. I mean, just minimal progress. It was once again Tesla that said, we're going to try something new. And they came up with this 4680 batteries, right? So, every time I want to say the reason that we even are talking about this is because Tesla tried to make some progress here, right? So here's where, once again, my problem with Tesla is that they promise something and they just don't deliver. And the way they don't deliver is kind of hush-hush. And let's talk about this 4680 batteries. There were 2 benefits to them, really 3 benefits to them. One was that, the chemistry of the anode, another is chemistry of cathode, and another one is just, because they're bigger batteries, the walls are going to be thinner, and therefore their energy density would be better. And now that, they've produced them, and people like Sandy Munro, one of the biggest Tesla apologists and Tesla fanboys, I think he beats you even in that category. He had to go and say, oh, crap, none of that happened. I mean, none of that happened. And you can easily see that I think it was Model Y that started getting those batteries, didn't get any really faster charging times, didn't go any further with the same batteries. So are you disappointed? What is the excuse here?
I think that the Battery Day presentation where they explained what 4680 was going to be maybe wasn't clear enough how long it was going to take to get there. And it's clear now. Drew Baglino, who's on the Tesla team, has explained that the targets that they talked about on Battery Day were for 2026. I think that they are behind in terms of production. I think they had hoped to be producing more 4680 cells at this point, and that is one of the things that slowed up Cybertruck and has slowed up Tesla's growth. But I think, by the way, I don't think the walls of the cell are thinner. The walls of the cell are actually
3 times thicker.
The walls are
than it should be
because of their use in the structural battery pack. But I think what we have to I think what we have to recognize is that this is engineering. Engineering, you start with, okay, we have an idea, and we think this is a really good idea, and we do our first cut. We come up with a prototype. Then we come up with a pre-production version, and then we start producing. And what we've seen with Tesla is the 2018 Model 3 and the 2023 Model 3 are very different vehicles. That as they continue to iterate, they continue to get better and better and better. So a really good example is they talked about using dry battery electrode, dry battery, the dry cathode. Well, the cathode facility is being built. So currently, I believe they are using a wet cathode. I'm not 100% sure of that. But they're building a cathode facility that's going to produce the materials that are needed for dry cathode. I'm a little fuzzy on where exactly they are in that, whether they're already using dry cathode, but they're going to have more cathode material. They're going to be able to do it. But it's sort of like, number one, you've got to figure out how are we going to make these things? And you get to the point where you're making them in some volume at some reasonable cost. Because one of the goals is also to bring the cost down, right? There's a bunch of ways that this brings cost down if you do it right. And I don't believe they ever said it would charge faster. I believe what they said, maybe I'm wrong about that, but the main benefit was we're able to accomplish more in a larger cell. And they went to the largest cell they could to achieve a roughly similar charge and discharge rate. If they did a smaller cell, so the fastest charging and discharging cell in a Tesla is the 18650, the smallest cell that's in my Model X, right? Because you want that high performance. So the larger cell isn't necessarily for high performance in terms of like acceleration or fast charge. It's for being able to serve as a structural pack. It's for being able to manufacture at high volume at low cost. I think people may have misunderstood Battery Day if they thought it was about performance. It was about delivering a high volume of batteries at a low cost per kilowatt hour. That was the primary function.
Yeah. So
and they're not there. Listen, they're not there yet.
Listen, I totally understand that being first and pushing the boundaries takes time, right? And I never have that issue with Tesla or anybody, right? It will take longer. I mean, even my contractor who's remodeling my condo here, I know he will take longer, okay? But so that's not the thing. It's always what Elon, what he says, right? About how it's gonna be tomorrow, right? And also then how they hide their failures. It's okay to fail, like we talked about in the last video, right? It's okay to fail. That's how you succeed, right? Your example of SpaceX boosters was great, right? There's a collage that Elon Musk posted at some point with all of the explosions to finally get that amazing shot of those two boosters landing perfectly at some point, right? So I totally get it. But why do it in such a sleazy way, right? It had to be Sandy Munro, and I think there was another a guy who did a teardown to actually realize that what they promised. You're talking
about Jordan DC, the limiting factor, who did it.
Yeah, exactly.
Shirley Iman.
Why not just say, hey guys, we are selling 4680 batteries. They're not exactly where we're hoping they're going to be, but this is a first version. This is what they can do. This is the improvement. And we are hoping to get that done in another 2 or 3 years.
Wait a minute, they're not selling 4680 batteries. They're selling Model Ys with 4680 batteries.
I get it. We're selling our product based on the 4680 batteries.
4680 Model Y are spelled out on the website.
No, I get it. What I'm saying is that when you do this big presentation that the Battery Day was, and then you end up not delivering or at least delaying your product, why not mention it somehow? It doesn't have to be another big presentation, obviously, but it's almost somehow like I feel like they're just getting caught. Like somebody caught them, not actually having the chemistry to the promised, actually caught them having thicker cells, just like the 2170s have, where they could have just come out and say, listen, guys, progress takes time. And nobody would have blamed them for that.
Drew Baglino has said that. I mean, I listen to every investor call. I listen to Investor Day. It's a very frequent question in the Say Technologies. There's this thing where you can submit questions for the earnings calls, and they're asked probably more than half the earnings calls are asked about the progress of 4680. And Drew Baglino always answers the questions, and he's very straightforward about it. And they've spelled out where they're at, where they're going, and I think they do feel that they're behind. And I think a bunch of things happen. Let's not forget, over the past few years, there have been some disruptions in the global economy, in the supply chain. There have been issues. There are things that come up that made it hard to get work done.
You're missing my point. By the way, but first of all, it's
So they are
not where
behind.
this
They are
information came
They are
from.
behind.
It didn't come
not
from the
hiding it.
earnings call. It didn't come from the earnings calls. It came from those teardowns. That's when we first found out that what those 4680 cells have is nothing what they've promised. So it wasn't upfront. It didn't come from Tesla. It came from those people who actually did a teardowns.
I don't think that at Battery Day they said the first version of our battery will have this energy density. They said this is what they're going for long term. They had a chart that showed the graph projecting out into the future. And I don't think you're correct about Tesla hiding it or waiting until Jordan Gieske did his teardown. Jordan didn't do the teardown. Jordan worked with Shirley Mong, and she arranged for some lab in, I think, San Diego to tear the battery down. There's no expose there. The battery isn't where they projected it would be at Battery Day because we're not in 2026 yet. You build your pre-production prototype. Then you build your first production version, and then you iterate, and that is the way that Tesla works. That's the way that SpaceX works. That's the way the Boring Company works. I'm guessing that's the way the Neuralink is going to work. The problem is that other companies don't do that. Other companies don't iterate in the same way that Tesla does. You can watch Joe Justice talk about how much Tesla iterates, how many changes, and Sandy Munro has probably talked to you about how many changes Tesla makes constantly. They're constantly changing the vehicles. A vehicle you buy that was built this month is different than a vehicle that was built a month ago. Where, with Ford and General Motors and Volkswagen, they make changes once a year or much less frequent changes.
Yeah. Well, we can argue about which one is better. I mean, I think it's also preference. I prefer if they change it once a year, but that's consumer preference. But, but at the same time, Lucid CEO, Peter Rollison, came out pretty much shortly after that.
Peter Frodlinson, what? Okay, go ahead.
Well, listen, you can call him names all you want, but he turned out to be right. And he is the one who actually was the only one who figured out how to make a car that goes further than any Tesla, and charges faster than any Tesla. So you got to give him some credit.
Wait. Peter Frodlinson is the guy who said that only Tesla went through production hell, that other car companies don't go through production hell. He was wrong about that.
Well, listen, we're not here to discuss him. I'm just saying there's one guy.
No, you just said that they made a vehicle that has more range. If you cram a really ridiculously large battery pack in the vehicle and you lie about how many kilowatt hours are in the battery pack, which they did, right? And you claim that...
No, not right. No, I don't know what you're talking about there.
It's a 138 kilowatt hour pack. Their initial filing with the EPA was 138 kilowatt hour pack, and then they retracted and said it was 118 kilowatt hour pack. It's a 500-mile range because they crammed a lot of extra batteries in it. That's it.
Did somebody prohibit Tesla from doing this?
No, Tesla doesn't need, because Tesla knows you don't need more than 400 miles of range.
Well, that's kind of funny because Tesla said that they were going to come up with all kinds of cars with 500 miles of range. So at some point they thought that would be the right number. But listen, let me rephrase it. Some guy that you guys all don't like, and I just don't want to I don't want to really discuss that could be a different video. Some guy who said that, hey, that sounds like a bunch of bullshit. And then people like Sandy Munro.
What was Rawlinson's specific criticism?
He basically said it's better packaging rather than breakthrough chemistry. That was very close to what he said. He basically said it's great packaging and there's some actual advantages to it, but this is not a breakthrough chemistry technology. So far,
they haven't implemented first of all, NMC 811 is a more advanced battery chemistry than NMC 532, right? You have more nickel versus cathode. It uses less cobalt, which is important, and you have a higher ratio of nickel to manganese. Now, there actually is some interesting progress with manganese, and we may see some high energy density manganese cells in the future. But the plan all along was, and Elon said this along the way, that they expect to improve the chemistry as they go.
No, so listen, I'm all good, but that's not what Sandy Munro said, right? Sandy Munro, and I quote, not because I have it on tape, but also because I was standing right next to him when he said it, that was crap, right? So, and this is kind of goes to...
Well, but it is crap because it's not the chemistry that's in the cell today. It's the chemistry that the cell will have in 2026 when Lucid Motors is no longer in business. When Peter Frodlinson is off on some Caribbean island of making sure he stays away from Saudi consulates.
Well, last time I talked to you, listen, I'm not a big fan of Lucid lately, but last time I talked to you, you had to make some concessions that your original estimation of Lucid was wrong, that you thought they weren't going in production, right? And they ended up going in production. So I would say predictions are funny, right? But hey, listen, this is the guy who thought that Biden was going to make it, right? So I'm just saying we've all had a share of bad calls.
I was not. I may have gotten a little bits and pieces wrong on Lucid along the way. I was not wrong about Lucid. They were a fraud from the beginning. They're a fraud now.
I don't think so, but that's a different video I don't mind making with you. But listen, let's talk more about the 4680s. And there's another question I wanted to ask you just about the future. Because at this point, 4680s, everyone and their uncle is making them. There's an Israeli company, StoreDot, that some people argue is actually doing a better job than even Tesla. And Tesla is not even doing it themselves. It looks like they're going to actually continue their partnership with Panasonic, which actually I think was a great idea. Is there much of an advantage to this that Tesla really has when everyone else is doing that? And maybe someone else will beat them to this non-crappy 4680 battery.
Well, so first of all, I believe Panasonic is building 4680s in Wakayama, Japan. LG Chem is building 4680s in Korea. And I believe LG Chem is working on a factory to produce 4680s in the US. And maybe Panasonic has got a factory that's going up in Kansas, west of Kansas City, I think. So I do think that there are other companies making. Listen, Tesla would be thrilled, and I would be thrilled if other companies started making more batteries and Tesla didn't have to make batteries. That would be great. The practical reality is that Tesla announced that at Giga Nevada, they're going to expand production of basically a whole new set of 4680 cell production at Giga Nevada, eventually reaching maybe 500 gigawatt hours a year. And presumably they're going to scale Texas to a larger amount of battery cell production. There's a real value in Tesla producing their own batteries. I think this idea that somebody has a better 4680, first of all, I never heard of this Dot company that you're talking about. Are they producing?
StoreDot.
Are they producing in volume?
I think they're starting to, but again, they have been in the news a lot, and everybody's covering them like, hey, this is they might actually beat Tesla to the actual promised land. No pun intended, actually. They're an Israeli company, 4680 batteries. So they have actually been very steadily making progress towards volume production, and I think they're starting it this year.
Okay, well, Tesla's already in some level of volume production of 4680, and no one else is.
Right, but we just talked about how they're not really the 4680s that, I mean, the size is 4680, but it's not the chemistry that they originally promised. What I'm saying is, maybe, listen, this is a question to you.
They're the only ones making 4680s that are going in vehicles that are being delivered to customers. Panasonic will be delivering 4680s. LG Chem will be delivering 4680s. I hope this Israeli company delivers 4680s. There's only one customer for 4680s. Tesla's the only customer. If somebody else wants to make 4680s, great. That means Tesla can make more cars. I love it. I want everybody to make 4680s for Tesla.
I have no point in this race. I was just literally just kind of curious. But okay, let's talk about something else because, 4680s is kind of the pony that Tesla has picked. But it's the solid state batteries that kind of everybody else is chasing. And it's kind of a consensus that, well, that's when we finally going to get to, the charging times and the range that everybody really wants, right? So, and 4680s is kind of a stepping stone. Do you think it's a mistake for Tesla not to, I mean, it doesn't seem like they're doing any R&D on this or acquiring any companies that are doing solid state batteries. Could Tesla lose this race to someone like Volkswagen Group that's heavily investing into solid state battery technology? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. I think solid state is something that probably will happen in the next 5 or 10 years. My guess would be that Tesla is doing research on solid state, but it's not their highest priority. I think solid state gets played up a lot and it misses a key point. Like the 2170 cells and 18650 cells and the 4680 cells that Tesla's using now, they're also using the lithium iron phosphate prismatic cells. And the other cells, the 4680, 2170, and 1865s are all higher energy density than the lithium iron phosphate cells. And you know what? It turns out that the lithium iron phosphate cells are good enough for cars. They're not good for all car applications, but they're good for a lot of car applications, and they're really good for grid storage. So the idea that you need solid state, the promise of solid state is that it's going to be higher energy density. And the reality is that the energy density that we have is good enough. It's not bad to get better, but the energy density that we have is good enough for the vast majority of applications that we need. And getting some incremental improvement in energy density is going to happen anyway, just because Panasonic has been improving their energy density, LG Chem has been improving their energy density, even CATL is improving the energy density of lithium iron phosphate. But the idea that there's this fantasy solid state battery out there that's going to change the game has already changed. Like if we don't improve, let's be clear, if we do not improve battery technology at all going forward, if we're stuck with the existing 4680, 2170, 1865 and lithium iron phosphate, if that's all we have, we're still going to transition the world to sustainable energy. And there's certain applications like flying planes where higher energy density really matters. And then the other challenge with solid state, it's not just can you make that battery, it's can you make it at volume at low cost. Because if you make a battery that's got more energy density, but it costs 5 times as much per kilowatt hour, then you're not solving the problem, because you need to be able to deliver cars. You need to be able to deliver smaller cars to people who can't afford Teslas today.
Granted. And listen, I agree with you in terms of we are pretty much there as far as delivering the range that people need, right? To me, honestly, anything above 200 miles, like it's good enough for most people. And yes, we can still get to 3, 4, 5, probably 600. That game has been won, I believe. The game that electric cars have been losing from day one, honestly, is the refueling time. Right, so the solid state technology is actually drastically improves that, just drastically, right? So I think that's the game that technology is supposed to win, which is really the last game we're playing, right? That's the only last stronghold that gas cars have over electric cars, and this is really even in just in terms of long distance travel.
I want to tell you why charging time doesn't really matter. Number one, I'm charging my car right now. Okay.
Same.
It doesn't matter how long it takes to charge. It's sitting outside my house while we're doing this conversation. It's been charging the entire time we've been doing this conversation. And I can't fill my gas car at a gas station while I'm doing a Zoom call with you. So the reality is, when I go on a long road trip, like I just drove to southern tip of Texas to watch the rocket launch and drove back. When I go on a long road trip, it does take a little bit longer because of that charging time when I have to stop to charge at a supercharger, right? That is true. It takes longer to charge the car than it takes to fill a gas tank. That is absolutely 100% true. Costs a lot less too, by the way. But overall, over the course of a month, let's say, or the course of a year, I spend less time charging my car than I would spend filling the tank because I can charge at home.
Listen, no one watching this doesn't know what you're talking about, right? Like everybody knows this.
I wanted to get to a different point, though. The point that matters is that we're heading towards a world of robo-taxis, whether it's 2 years from now or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. At some point, we're going to get to a robo-taxi world. And when we're in a robo-taxi world, you're not going to care how long it takes to charge, because the robo-taxi is going to arrive and take you where you want to go. And if you're going on a long enough trip that the vehicle is going to need to charge, it's going to stop somewhere and another robo-taxi is going to pick you up and take you the rest of the way. So you're not going to have to wait at all. So the charging time issue is not an issue in a robo-taxi world. It's only an issue in a world where I'm driving my own car, and we're heading towards a world where 95% of people don't bother owning a car.
I think you're wrong in terms of all people would want to use Uber, because I think, like, for example, people like me, robo-taxi or not, I want my own space, just like I want my own home and my own bed. I would want my space to, the robo-taxi needs to be mine. I think by then there will be either a battery swap or, long fast charging battery technology. But right now, this is the biggest point of resistance, because there are tons of people who own electric cars. Like even me right now, I'm a digital nomad. So I have to go and charge it somewhere at the Electrify America station. Tons of people who live in apartment complexes have that problem, right? People still try to Uber in their electric cars, and that, they do need to charge sometimes in the middle of their workday. And there's a bunch of examples. I know we're in a transition period, like I get it. But this is when we need everything we can to get the rest of the world switched. Because at the end of the day, I saw a huge difference moving from Silicon Valley California here to Houston, Texas. Over there, it just seemed like everybody and their uncle had an electric car, right? Here, there's not that many electric cars, man. We have a way more work to do than we actually think.
Yeah, but you have Buc-ee's.
I've heard of them. I've never bothered. Yeah. So everybody.
Buc-ee's has a super. You don't have a Tesla. See, if you had a Tesla and you were going to supercharge, you'd go to the Buc-ee's. But I think there's 2 Buc-ee's in the Houston area. That's the place you go when you want to supercharge.
I go to Walmart because that's where free Electrify America chargers are. And even some of them are actually working. So it's good times. But all right. So what do you think what do you think is going to happen in the next 3 years? And I'm not just talking about Tesla. Where are we at with range? And I don't mean like Lucid's range. I mean like just average. Like right now, it seems like an acceptable, what you expect type of a range from an electric vehicle is 250 miles, right? And an acceptable charging time is about 30 to 40 minutes, right? Where do you think we're going to be in 3 years?
Hold on a second. So first of all, I have about 300 miles of range on my Model 3 and 330 miles of range on my Model X. And I personally would like to have, for road tripping, for general daily life, it's fine. For road tripping, I would like to have more range. I think 360 miles of range would be much better for road tripping, just to be clear. And I think the charge time is a little confusing for people. And it's one of these questions that you get, how long does it take to charge? And there isn't really a simple answer to how long does it take to charge. Right now, it's taking hours to charge my car, but I don't care because I don't need to pay attention to it. When I pull up to a supercharger, it depends. If I arrive at 10% and I'm only charging to 60%, then it might take 15 minutes. But if I've arrived at 20% and I want to go to 90%, it might take 40 minutes. And if I'm at a 150 kilowatt charger versus 250 kilowatt charger, I would say on average a charge takes 20 minutes. In my experience driving a Tesla, a supercharge takes 20 minutes. So dropping that to 15 minutes is not a big deal. And I'm not convinced, by the way, that solid state is going to charge that much faster.
It will. Of course it will, because if anything solid state brings to the table is the fact that it has much less resistance, so it doesn't heat up as well. Because, the speed of charging is not about how fast we can push the electricity into the battery. It's whether or not we can keep it from, catching on fire because it's so hot, right? Solid state.
No, it's whether you degrade the structure of the cathode when you cram the electrons in too fast.
Well, that's after it doesn't catch on fire. But the problem is the cooling of the battery when you're charging, right? That's the number one problem.
No, the battery temperature, at least on a Tesla, the battery temperature is not an issue. The issue is that as the battery gets, so if you're charging from 10% to 50%, it's really fast. It's when the battery starts to get full that it starts to slow down. And the closer you get to full, this is something that they discussed at Battery Day, that Drew Baglino talked about, the bookshelf and whatever this stuff is, that the number of spaces for the electrons to fit into gets fewer and fewer and fewer, and it gets harder to cram the electrons in, so you have to slow down. And I don't know. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying what I know of solid-state batteries, I'm not sure that solves that problem. The space left, and is the cathode going to somehow be able to accommodate a faster rate of electrons coming into the cathode? And my gut hunch is the reason Tesla is not at least publicly pursuing solid state is because solid state is a dead end. They've figured out already that they don't need solid state. That if somebody comes up with a great solid state solution, then Tesla will buy them, or they'll just buy batteries from them.
Yeah, could be. But I mean, the leader in that technology right now is QuantumScape, and they're pretty much owned by Volkswagen Group, and they will not sell it to Tesla. They'll first try to obviously power all the Volkswagen. I think Porsche is going to be first in line, obviously. But all right, let me ask you another question that's with that we don't need to have agree on pretenses. When do you think the 4680 batteries are going to be delivered the way they were taunted during the Battery Day?
So I think that the ultimate, 4680, that's more than 300 watt hours per kilogram. That's a more advanced chemistry, with dry electrode and dry cathode or whatever. I think that's probably, I think they'll get really close to what we were talking about by 2026, if not further, and they'll continue to optimize after that. I think the bigger question that people don't realize, it's not about whether it's the right chemistry, whether the chemistry is or the right performance. It's manufacturing those cells in volume so that they can make more vehicles. And, keep in mind the IRA tax credit and the advantages that provides. And as they scale production of 4680s at Giga Texas, over time, as they produce more batteries, it lowers the cost per battery because you've got the capital expenditure is amortized over a larger number of batteries. So from an accounting perspective, in other words, the cost of the batteries comes down. So the really big issue is not when do they deliver some, exotic chemistry that makes the vehicle perform that much better. The really big question is when do they produce at scale? And my understanding is they've got one line running in Giga Texas now, and they've got 3 lines getting ready to be commissioned. So probably before the end of this year, they're going to be producing a much higher volume. And that's what the volume of production matters a lot more because Tesla just needs more batteries.
Yeah, no, that I agree on. Look at that. We actually ended up agreeing on something. That's not how we planned it. But we have disagreed much more in our previous debate about whether or not the FSD beta is a scam. And I'll let you guess which one of us took which side. But you can watch that video right here. I'm looking forward to all of your comments. Well, maybe not all of them, to most of your comments. Other than that, see you guys next time, and remember to stay charged.